Broadcasting live, coming at you from a little bit different scenery today. Usually I'm coming from the study of my house. This time I'm coming with a little different background, as you can tell. Coming to you live from the Dallas On Air broadcasting station. Thankful for this opportunity. You are listening to your favorite Blockhead, the only podcast in the podcasting world that can somehow incorporate the Peanuts comic strip 1 minute and then be talking about MMA and warriors inside the octagon the next. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me this morning or this afternoon if you tend to download this at a certain time. You know, on my last podcast, we had a great guest on. I'm thankful to Erskine Anavitarte, who came from Nashville, who came onto my podcast. Great times with him. We move forward, and we have, again, different kind of scenery in the background, as you can tell. Give it a round of applause in your own head. As we get going, guys, I want to share a couple of my affiliate links. You know, most of the time us podcasters are striving for a sponsorship. We are striving to be able to have a relationship with big partners. Well, your favorite Blockhead has a different route that some are talking about, not enough. It's called affiliate sales. Your favorite Blockhead is a proud affiliate with several, and I'm going to show some of you today. If you take a look at the screen, I want you to know about Collin Street Bakery. And you go, why are you talking about fruitcakes? Guys, there is a huge difference between store-bought fruitcake and a world-famous deluxe fruitcake from the Collin Street Bakery in Corsicana, Texas. This is baked true to the old-world 1896 German recipe and thriving out of Corsicana, Texas. These cakes are ordered and shipped to all 50 states and 196 foreign countries, especially to European royalty. Why? That's because they make it right. Each of these fruitcakes is a perfect balance of pecan shelled in Corsicana, Texas, hand-picked pineapple and papaya straight from their own farms grown out of Costa Rica. Red cherries from Oregon and Washington State. They get the best fruits for their deluxe fruit cake. If you join their mailing list, you can see where you can save 5% off of your first online order. And I got one better for you today. Those of you that are big movie buffs, if you watch, there's even a snippet of the fruit cake tin in the background for the smash hit drama The Godfather. It's in there. Best things I ever ate. One of the hosts from Chopped has talked about having fruitcake and bringing that and everybody being able to indulge in delicious bakery treats from Collin Street Bakery. And if you go through my links or if you go to the link itself, when you go to Collin Street Bakery, Blockhead's going to save you a little bit of money. Make sure on any size fruitcake that you order, make sure when you get to the apply code, use the offer code SAVE10. That's SAVE10, all uppercase, 2 numbers, SAVE10. And Blockhead just saved you 10% off your fruitcake. And then your first order, you can go through, you can get your pecan pies, your pineapple pecan cake, anything that you see that would be delicious goodies you can get from Collin Street Bakery. And guys, one more little thing before we start. You know that school is starting up again, don't you? You parents are looking for discounts. You're looking for school supplies. Maybe you're just getting ready. Football season is starting. And you want to be able to get your party supplies when you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday night football at your house. Well, you have been saved by the Blockhead because I'm going to be promoting Dollar Tree. I'm also a proud affiliate. This podcast is a proud affiliate with Dollar Tree, ringing in back-to-school savings and anything you need from Saturday, Sunday, Monday night football. Gear up for your class time and check off your list. If you're a student needing composition notebooks, flashcards, colored pencils, erasers, online selections of just $1 on any school supplies for all grades. If you're a teacher, you need to stock your classroom. Stay on budget with your teacher supplies, from workbooks to kids to art supplies, classroom decorations, hand sanitizer, because you teachers know you need it, storage containers, and more. You're going to find it. Everything is just $1 at Dollar Tree, and it's easier now because you can go online, use my links, use the description of my podcast, go to Dollar Tree and get all your back-to-school needs and your football party supplies when you show on the big screen your favorite NFL NCAA team. Everything's just $1 at Dollar Tree. So now I take my iconic swig of water. They say that might not be best practices when you're doing a podcast, but hey, we're all in the pioneer stages now at this point, aren't we? So once again, guys, thank you for sticking with me through the plugs from my affiliates. Thank you for tuning in this very special setting I have today. I have another verse of the day. On my last episode, when I did this on my own, I did a verse from a particular scripture. The scripture for the day is going to be John 14, verse 27, and this is what it says, and I quote, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." And there is a special reason why I say that today. Got a friend of mine. I'm not going to use his name. Names have been changed to protect the innocent in this podcast. We're going to refer to him as Gravedigger. And you think, oh, come on, what are you talking about? That's a famous song redone by Dave Matthews. No, I'm not talking about Gravedigger, the song itself. Any of you that are into monster truck racing, you're familiar with one of the most synonymous names in monster trucks, known as Gravedigger. And I use that for him. He's always been a truck racing and all kinds of NASCAR fan that I've known throughout the years. He's just struggling today. He's having a tough time. So this is for you, my friend, Gravedigger. This is what I have to tell you. If you haven't figured out by now, any of you that have a faith walk, not talking about religion, talking about your own peace of mind, that ocean of peace you can only get from one place. There was something that is agreeable to most of us. Our Savior, one of Jesus' absolute favorite classrooms for his disciples, was the Sea of Galilee. What do you mean by that, Blockhead? I'll tell you what I mean. They go out in the boat, he's sleeping, storm comes up, they're panicking, and he gets up and tells the storm to be quiet, and exclaims, "Where's your faith?" Another time, he's out on the water and he calls for the disciples to come out. I share that because he does allow storms in our lives, but he changes the nature of the crisis you face. That's to give you peace of mind, whether you are my friend Gravedigger or anybody else that happens to stumble across this podcast. You want another proof of that? There's a book I'll recommend for you. The former guitarist for Korn, Brian Welch, came out and did a couple of books whenever he found his faith. He did one called Save Me From Myself, and then he did another one. He did one called Stronger, 40 Days of Metal and Spirituality. And he proclaims in this book, and I quote, "There isn't a storm that will ever disturb that ocean of peace that my Savior has given me." He had to learn. This was a man who was at the top of the world, had everything at his beck and call. And yet, he's a little boy crying out for help. You can follow that in that book as well. Stronger, 40 Days of Metal and Spirituality by Brian Welch. It's worth reading, especially if you're not quite ready to dive into a faith walk as much. Another swig here. On my last episode, moving into a different direction, on my last podcast, there was a Washington Post article that came out. Vice President Pence announced that there was the creation of the Space Force. And since I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, I had a few people that approached me and said, "How do you feel about this whole thing?" Well, it's kind of like how, have you not noticed what's happening here? One segue to another. This is one of the ways my mind works. Linus Van Pelt once said, "There are three things you never discuss with people: religion, politics, and the Great Pumpkin." Well, I just jumped from religion or faith walk and went into something political. And here's my answer. I need a little time to think about it. This article is announcing the creation of Space Force. I guess you can say, is it another giant leap for the United States into space exploration? Or is it another example of American colonialism? I think you're going to go on one of the sides of the fence on that one. But I'd rather not answer this point. Not at this point. I'd rather not answer in haste, is what I mean. I'd rather be able to give a better analysis when we see the launch of the Space Force. It's proclaimed it's going to be in 2020, and again, we'll give that time and see how that works out. But here's where my tie-in is. I thought about this from last episode I did, episode 57. Those of you that tuned into that particular podcast, you heard me talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. You heard me discuss that groundbreaking movie that when you think you've got it figured out, you don't have a clue what it's about. And I'm only going to use one scene. We covered the monolith on that particular episode. This time, I'd like to take a look at the deactivation of Hal. Dave makes his way into the memory center, and Hal is starting to be deactivated, and then he says, I was taught a song. Would you like me to sing it for you? And the song was Daisy. And of course, it's sung until the deactivation process is complete. And that's why I wonder. I don't have enough valid evidence for this, but I just wonder. It allows me to speculate a little bit, because you know I'm a huge Peanuts fan. And I wonder if Charles Schulz was mentioning that particular movie in one of his TV series, in his episodes. Because we don't always just look at Charlie Brown Christmas or The Great Pumpkin on this particular episode. Those are classics. But let's take a look at the This Is America Charlie Brown. There's a whole episode about the NASA space station. And this is only one little spot. Again, you have to watch it and see what I'm talking about. I'll bring all this in full circle for you in a minute. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not a bad idea. Yeah, where he's deactivating him.
And he taught me to sing a song. If you'd like to hear it, yes, I can sing it for you.
Yes, I'd like to hear it, Hal. Sing it for me.
It's called Daisy. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a house.
That should be fine. Well, there you have it. I bring that up just because Charles Schulz was very subtle about bringing American culture into his comic strips and also into his TV series. So in that particular episode, the NASA space station, there's a point to where they're going to be up in space for about 60 days. And then at the 30-day period, there's a check-in where not space station, but mission control can check in and see how they're doing. Well, they're already at each other's throats. Things aren't, great because Lucy's in charge, and you know very well she's running her queendom. And somewhere in there is a moment where Peppermint Patty, since she's the athletic one, she comes on and shows that they have to do at least 2 hours of exercise a day. She gets on the cycle, and what is she singing? Daisy. I'm wondering if there was a tie-in from 2001: A Space Odyssey, only because the movie was made in 1968. This came around in the late 80s. There's always wonder if there's a tie-in. I say that also because that Charles Schulz was very intrigued in groundbreaking movies. He was a huge fan of Citizen Kane. Absolutely a fan of Citizen Kane. And that movie has been debated as the greatest of all time because its fluent influence is non-debatable. The film focus that Kubrick used, if you look in all of his movies for Stanley Kubrick, it's very apparent he uses a lot of Citizen Kane's different kind of film and focus. Orson Welles admitted in one of his 1960 interviews that the film was intended to be a social documentary. It was meant to show the dangers of acquisition, the dangers of having too much property, but in the end we find out that Rosebud is his sled. That was another one. That comic strip from 1973 has Linus watching Citizen Kane for the first time. Of course, Lucy walks off and says, Rosebud was his sled. He screams, because now there's no reason to watch it anymore. But a lot of debated about is that the loss of childhood that's taken place. You're watching a show called Your Favorite Blockhead. You're watching a guy who loves Charlie Brown. Maybe it's one of those men tend to do this a lot too. You identify your purpose with your work. And more often than not, when you have a significant other, will tell you your life is not consumed by your work. There are many components: your faith walk, your family, your time with your friends, who you are with them. And really, I've talked about that on my Trinity as well. My Trinity would be humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. He will lift you up. There's also people don't want to be serious 24/7, so that's my emotional outlet. That's what this podcast is meant to be. If it's going to be an emotional outlet for you, then so be it. And the third one, especially for podcasting, we have to stick together. We need to lock arms instead of building boundaries between ourselves. So that's really where, as podcasters, we have to stick together. When 9/11 took place, we stopped being hateful to each other, and we were American. And there needs to be that thriving, not so much American pride or nationalism. I just mean that there should be a lot more harmony amongst ourselves, but it's more of an undercurrent now. It shouldn't take a national tragedy for us to be living like that amongst ourselves. So again, does that all include in Citizen Kane? Possibly. Depends on your interpretation. Was Charles Schulz using Daisy just like he did in 2001: Space Odyssey? It depends on your interpretation, and you have a little taste of mine. The onion's being peeled back a little bit. And one great thing I love about that episode, too, is that is the greatest miss of the football for poor Charlie Brown. This one he misses in zero gravity. He does his spin, and he still misses it all the way through. Kind of fun to watch. That's his grandest miss of all time. And there's also a comment made by Peppermint Patty, which is applicable to Your Favorite Blockhead's life. To keep plugging away. She goes, what do you mean by keep plugging away? Well, you got to hand it to Charlie Brown. He perseveres. He doesn't always get things right, but he continues to try. He continues to keep plugging away. I believe that should be one of the purposes behind my podcast as a recreational guy. Somebody who's taken a hobby and wants to turn it into a passion and be able to reach you through your earphones. I hope this can touch your heart. But also there's an important question I want to ask before we move on. Zig Ziglar once said, are you a wandering generality or are you a meaningful specific? In other words, I'm asking you, how proactive are you? Do you have a dream to be a podcaster, a blogger, start your own website? Couldn't be any easier than it is today. You have to go find the resources, though. Even Seth Godin talks about that in his book Tribes, that people are tired of following committees. People in the above realm. Some of these guys that are back here in these skyscrapers of Dallas that are looking down upon us. Not everybody wants to follow a committee. They want to follow a person. Someone who's genuine. Who doesn't pigeonhole things. If that's not your favorite blockhead, then so be it. But I hope it's somebody. And as I get into that, I covered a couple of things that might interest you. I'm sharing my interest in Your Favorite Blockhead, but there's also another website I want you to go check out. If you happen to be a comic book fan, if you're into superheroes, if you're into movies, TV, and film, go check out my friends at Five Finger Tees. Five Finger Tees offers a massive selection of movie, TV, pop culture inspired, and ridiculously funny t-shirts that simply won't break the bank. And their philosophy is simple. They do all the work for you. They take care of customer service, designing, printing, photography, shipping, website design. And by doing this, Five Finger Tees gives you, the customer, a great deal without having to sacrifice on quality. So make sure when you decide on there's plenty of t-shirts to look at. I found one for Pizza Planet from Toy Story. I found Finding Nemo, mine. That one's on there. I found You're Killing Me Smalls. My particular favorite is the Great Pumpkin Believer. Great t-shirt that happens to be in there. You can go through and you can scroll through all these. Now, if you go through in the horror section, this is perfect as you're going into October. My goodness, do we have a selection of t-shirts that would be of your personality. Take the time, look through these shirts. You'll recognize plenty of them from movie and pop culture. Have a lot of fun with Five Finger Tees. And make sure when you go to checkout, make sure when you get there, use the promo code 5OFF. That's FIVEOFF. 5 off. One word, all lowercase. So you can get 5% off of your purchase through Five Finger Tees. That's a little special thank you from your favorite Blockhead. That's the little treat that I want to give to you as you look through these websites. Have some fun with them, guys, and enjoy Five Finger Tees. I happen to love these guys. So now, as we bring it back into the other portion, you heard me say in my introduction that this is the one podcast that somehow will incorporate the Peanuts comic strip, and then we'll talk about mixed martial arts. I'm particularly fond of a group that came on to Dallas On Air. Giving a shout out to you guys, MMA On Air. Loved hearing you guys that you go to LFA events, Legacy Fighting Alliance. I love the work they're doing. Pat Miletich and all those guys are doing great, building up the talent so they can be ready for the UFC or to Bellator. Loving the work that they're doing. But an article came out I wanted to cover with this. I could go into LFA, but I'm realizing sometimes that when I talk to you, I'm talking to more of the casual fan. I could sit here and talk over your head, and I could say, oh, here's the deal with 228, UFC is coming up. We have Dallas, Tyron Woodley is going up against Darren Till. All that's coming up in the future. We've also got the co-main events, and all the events after that are very women-heavy, and which is great because the UFC is finally starting to give those girls a chance to be on their platform. I'm loving it. Valentina Shevchenko is going to be having a fight in the co-main event. But really, I'm realizing that I've got to talk to what you're familiar with. Every time I talk to somebody about UFC or about MMA, one name comes up. What do you think about Conor? More often than that, that's what I face. So I'm not going to focus on Conor, but I am going to focus on an opponent that he should have already had again. This is what we're waiting on. When you have two fighters that go into the cage and they're 1 for 1. One wins one fight, then one wins the other. You go to what's called a rubber match. You have the best 2 of 3. And what are the 2 biggest pay-per-view buys of all time at this point? In the top 5, MMA journalist Ariel Helwani shared this on his website and shared that the top 5, 4 out of 5 of them are Conor McGregor fights, which is true. There's no denying that. What are the top 2? Conor and Nate Diaz 1, Conor and Nate Diaz 2. And we're sitting here going, when's the next one coming? They're 1 for 1. Nate Diaz wins the first one by submission. Then you have a decision goes to Conor. You can easily build that up into the third bout. You have huge ethnicities that get behind both of these guys. And this is what we wait on. Well, we have a low-key MMA article comes out about Nate Diaz being upset about the Conor promo that comes up for 229. Now, this is where I want to kind of help the casual viewers understand something, and I'd like to help Nate Diaz understand this too. If he stumbles across this podcast, here's what I'm going to ask you. You seem to be upset, and again, it's hard to know if you're working the fans or if this is truly your emotions coming out and you don't want to deal with the promo that's going, that Conor is surpassing you. It's indeterminate right now. I'm not sure. But 229 for sure is going to have Conor and Khabib for the main event. UFC 230 was supposed to be Nate Diaz versus Dustin Poirier. We already had the stare down for that. Then we have the press conference. And a promo comes out for Conor and Khabib. And Nate Diaz storms off the set. Now here's what I'm going to say at this point. If we get the fight or not, I want Nate Diaz to realize what he just threw away. Especially what he did to Dustin Poirier, who absolutely deserves this spot. It was supposed to be a co-main event, but could easily become a main event. We don't have all the speculative matches that they want to see. You don't have Anderson Silva or George St. Pierre on paper right now. You don't have John Jones coming back at this point. Or nothing is solidified. There's no breaking news on Bloody Elbow or any of the other websites that I follow. But Nate Diaz turned down the opportunity if he's decided he wants nothing to do with this fight. He has turned down the biggest venue in the history of sports. Well, in the history of combative sports, for sure. For a casual fan, let me ask you this. If you had an opportunity to be on the main event card for one of these two, which one would you rather have to be on your resume? Would you rather have Las Vegas, Or would you rather have Madison Square Garden in New York City? Regardless of the payday, which one would you rather be on? Las Vegas, UFC 229, we have Conor and Khabib, for sure. We've got the fight, unless something happens, one misses weight or we have an injury that pulls out, whatever the stipulations might be, because it's becoming commonplace for us fans nowadays. But Nate Diaz, let me remind you as well, when did Conor last fight in the UFC in the octagon? UFC 205, not 225, I'm sorry, 205. And that was at MSG. Madison Square Garden. Yes, he held 2 titles simultaneously. Yes, he did. And we haven't seen him this. He's been on hiatus ever since. Held up the belts, held up the divisions, and then he had to be stripped so that Khabib could win his title. I'm just taking you back briefly here to show where my gripe is. My perspective is I would rather be able to have the greatest venue for any combative sport in the history of man. But you would rather get upset about Conor surpassing you at 229. You'd rather be on the card for Las Vegas. I understand there's a big payout, anybody who ends up on that card. But 230 is November 3rd, Madison Square Garden. You're going to throw away that opportunity, whether you're a co-main event or the main event. And do you see why I'm a little frustrated now? I'm even looking at my producer right now. Do you see why I've got a gripe with this? Madison Square Garden, where the Knicks and the Rangers have played historic games. Ali Frazier takes place here. Not too long ago, Miguel Cotto got his revenge against Margarito at MSG. WrestleMania 1, the 10th anniversary, WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 20. Where were they held, Nate? Madison Square Garden. Maybe you wouldn't have the same payout, but you would have something on your resume that nobody else can say. You would have the opportunity to rival what Conor did at 205. To say, I'm either in the co-main event or it got bumped up, which likely could have happened. Bumped you up to the main event. You win against Dustin Poirier. Now you got a chance to say, Conor McGregor, I won against him. I've beaten you twice, and I did it in Madison Square Garden. Can you imagine the buzz that would happen? And this is all speculation from my side. This is just me as a fan looking at it through a different angle. For a non-casual fan, which one of those venues would you rather have if you had the opportunity to grace the cage? Or even the boxing ring, for that matter. Or those of you that are pro wrestling fans, if you had a chance to perform. You know how coveted and how sacred the Madison Square Garden venue is. Does he have a rebuttal? Well, there's no way to know because, Nate Diaz is too busy being off the radar. I hope the casual fans can see where I'm going with this. Nate Diaz, if you are turning down this fight, you're also cheating and robbing Dustin Poirier out of the opportunity to shine on the grandest stage in combative sports of all time. I kind of want that to sink in. And if you dispute me, you want to disagree with me on this one, maybe MMA on Air guys might disagree with this. Joe Rogan, if you happen to come across this, well, I'll take the kiss if you don't mind, since you're one of the juggernauts in the top 5 of iTunes on podcasts. But nonetheless, while we wait for all these events to take place, make sure that you go and visit, all of you that are MMA, UFC fans, make sure you go visit UFCstore.com. and get the latest UFC gear and MMA merchandise from the official store of the UFC. Yes, your favorite Blockhead is a proud affiliate with UFCstore.com. You click the link in the description and you can shop through the near endless supply of MMA gear, including jerseys, walkout shirts, fight shorts, UFC clothing for men, women, kids. With the UFC online store, you can buy the latest gear representing your favorite fighters, whether it's Conor McGregor or Anderson Silva or former heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic, current heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. More of your favorite current and past cage fighters can be found on this website for UFCstore.com. So take some time looking through those websites. Yes, I have permission and the ability to share them with you, and it is a pleasure of mine. I hope you guys have enjoyed the scenery and the background of this particular little podcast. Until we meet again, this has been your favorite Blockhead. Thank you for joining me for Dallas on Air, and we will see you the next time around. Peace to you all.